Imagine marching thousands of miles, driven by faith, only to face betrayal, war, and impossible odds. The Crusades weren't just battles. They changed the world forever. But at what cost? Origins, faith, power, and war. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for a holy war at the Council of Clermont. His words ignited Europe. The goal? To reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim rule. But it wasn't just faith, it was power. Kings saw land, knights saw glory, merchants saw trade. By 1096, thousands marched east, answering the Pope's call. Some were noble warriors, others were peasants, untrained but driven by belief. They wore crosses, calling themselves God's army. As they traveled, chaos followed. In the People's Crusade, mobs attacked Jewish communities. Many perished before reaching the battlefield. In the East, the Byzantine Empire, once powerful, was weakening under Muslim pressure. Emperor Alexios I asked for help but feared betrayal. The Crusaders arrived, eager but divided. By 1097, their war truly began. The siege of Nicaea was the first major battle. The path to Jerusalem had begun, but blood, betrayal, and brutal wars awaited. Was it faith, ambition, or greed that drove them? The Crusades had begun, but their true cost was yet to unfold. 1099, the fall of Jerusalem. By 1097, Crusaders stormed Anatolia, defeating the Seljuks at Dorylaeum. They seized Antioch in 1098, but hunger and betrayal nearly destroyed them. Yet, faith and ambition pushed them forward. In 1099, they reached Jerusalem, exhausted but determined. The city, under Fatimid control, was heavily fortified. The Crusaders built siege towers, battling heat, thirst, and disease. On July 15, 1099, they breached the walls. What followed was a massacre. Muslims, Jews, even Christians were slaughtered. Blood filled the streets, marking one of history's darkest days. The Crusaders crowned Godfrey of Bouillon as ruler, refusing the title King of Jerusalem, calling himself Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. The First Crusade had succeeded, but peace was a myth. Muslim forces vowed revenge. Victory had come, but at what cost? The Holy Land was won, yet war had only just begun. 1147, a failed crusade. After the fall of Edessa in 1144, panic spread in Europe. In 1147, King Louis VI of France and Emperor Conrad I of Germany led the Second Crusade. Unlike the first, this campaign lacked unity and luck. The journey was brutal. Conrad's army was ambushed by the Seljuks near Dorylaeum. Most were slaughtered. Louis' forces suffered the same fate near Mount Cadmus. Starvation and betrayal weakened them further. By 1148, they'd reached the Holy Land, hoping to strike Jerusalem, but leaders disagreed. Instead, they attacked Damascus, a vital Muslim city. It was a disaster. Within days, they retreated in shame. By 1149, the crusade had failed. Muslim forces grew stronger under Nur ad-Din, uniting for future battles. The West was humiliated. The dream of reclaiming more land was fading, and a new leader was rising, one who would change history, Saladin. 1187, Saladin's victory. By 1174, Saladin, a Kurdish general, became ruler of Egypt and Syria. His goal? Unite Muslims and reclaim Jerusalem. He defeated rival factions and built a powerful army. In 1187, Crusader forces, led by Guy of Lusignan, marched to stop him. They met at Hattin on July 4. Trapped by heat and thirst, the Christian army collapsed. Saladin captured Guy and took the true cross as a trophy. With the Crusaders broken, Saladin moved toward Jerusalem. On October 2, 1187, the city surrendered peacefully. Unlike 1099, there was no bloodbath. He allowed Christians to leave safely or pay ransom. His mercy shocked Europe. The loss of Jerusalem sent waves of anger across the West. A new war was coming, one led by the legendary Richard the Lionheart. The fight for the Holy Land was far from over. 1191, Lionheart versus Saladin. After Jerusalem fell in 1187, Europe burned with rage. In 1189, King Richard I of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of Germany launched the Third Crusade. Before reaching the Holy Land, Barbarossa drowned in 1190 and his army scattered. Philip left after capturing Acre in 1191, leaving Richard the Lionheart to face Saladin alone. Richard's tactics were brilliant. At Arsuf in 1191, he crushed Saladin's forces. Step by step, he reclaimed Crusader lands, but Jerusalem remained out of reach. By 1192, exhausted by war, Richard and Saladin made peace. The Treaty of Jaffa allowed Christians safe passage to the holy sites, but the city stayed under Muslim control. Richard left, but the Crusades were far from over. His rivalry with Saladin became legend, a battle of courage, strategy, and faith that shaped history forever. 1204, the Lost Crusades. After Richard I, the Crusaders lost focus. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, instead of fighting Muslims, attacked Constantinople, a Christian city. Greed replaced faith. They looted the city, ending the Byzantine Empire's power. The Fifth Crusade, 1217 to 1221, targeted Egypt, believing it was the key to Jerusalem. They took Damietta in 1219, but poor planning led to disaster. The Nile flooded, trapping them. Forced to surrender, they left empty-handed. In 1228, Frederick II led the Sixth Crusade. Instead of war, he used diplomacy. In 1229, he negotiated control of Jerusalem without bloodshed. Ideas exchanged, worlds changed. The Crusades were wars, but they also sparked cultural exchange. When Crusaders arrived in the East, they encountered advanced Muslim science, medicine, and philosophy. They brought back Arabic numerals, algebra, and Greek knowledge preserved by Islamic scholars. Trade flourished. Spices, silk, and glass from Damascus and Baghdad flowed into Venice and Genoa. European castles adopted Islamic architecture, and doctors learned from Avicenna's medical texts. Language mixed too. Words like sugar, coffee, and algebra came from Arabic. Faith divided, wounds deep. The Crusades left scars on Christian-Muslim relations. What began as a war for Jerusalem became centuries of bloodshed. For Muslims, the Crusaders were invaders, Franks who burned cities and killed innocents. The 1099 massacre in Jerusalem was never forgotten. The sack of Constantinople, 1204, even divided Christians themselves, weakening the Byzantine Empire. Hatred grew on both sides. Trade and diplomacy continued, but fear remained. In Europe, myths of a brutal East spread. In the Muslim world, the Crusades became a reminder of foreign aggression. 1291, the end or beginning. The fall of Acre in 1291 marked the end of the Crusades. After nearly 200 years, Christian forces lost their last stronghold in the Holy Land. The dream of reclaiming Jerusalem was over. But the Crusades didn't just vanish. Their legacy shaped Europe and the Middle East. Kings gained power as Crusader knights lost influence. Trade routes expanded, fueling the Renaissance. For Muslims, the wars strengthened unity. Leaders like Saladin and the Mamluks became legends. The memory of foreign invasions lasted for centuries. Even today, the Crusades are debated. Were they acts of faith or brutal conquests? The Crusades shaped history, but culture tells its own story. Don't miss our next video. Subscribe now. Your next great story awaits.